vous parlez de transhumanisme quelque part, vous parlez d'intelligence artificielle, vous parlez d'immortalité aussi, vous en avez parlé. Pour donner suite à ce que vous venez de dire, nous allons accueillir sur scène le docteur Aubray Degré, qui est informaticien, bioinformaticien, spécialiste en biologie moléculaire et cellulaire, et c'est une des figures emblématiques en fait de la recherche contre le vieillissement. Il est le président et le fondateur d'un institut qui s'appelle SENS, qui est dédié justement, qui est basé en Californie, et qui est dédié à la recherche anti-âge. Et nous allons l'accueillir sur scène aujourd'hui pour un échange avec lui, l'homme d'église qui parle d'intelligence artificielle, l'homme de science qui parle d'immortalité, ça promet d'être un échange intéressant. Et pour le modérer, nous allons accueillir Melissa Rowley, qui est journaliste, qui nous vient directement des États-Unis, qui est contributrice à la BBC et qui a fait ses faits d'armes à CNN. Je vous laisse en de bonnes mains. Docteur, je vous en prie, pour cette conversation à deux.
Merci.
Thank you, Layla. I feel so far away from you right now. So I don't know about everybody in the audience or the two of you, but when it comes to remaining human, that is something I very much want in my life. But in a day and age when technology and science are advancing at unprecedented rates, it's important for us to understand how to harness and collaborate with this technology so that we can benefit humanity in the best, most impactful way possible. For people in the audience that are not necessarily technologically minded or in science, what are some things that we can do to keep in mind in order to be able to keep up with technology and have it move in the direction we want it to go versus the other way around?
So, I don't know, perhaps I talked a lot, so I'll let the doctor speak
Give
first.
Aubrey a chance.
Sure. So I think the first thing we need to do is to ensure that the way we think about and imagine our future is not driven by fear, but driven by rational, objective assessments of what kind of future we want and what kind of alternative futures are available to us. So in my work on the biology of aging, I constantly encounter fear of the unknown. People who are otherwise perfectly rational on every other topic, they will say the craziest things, and they will be absolutely unwilling to be rational about this because, first of all, they don't really know what a post-aging world would be like, and secondly, even though there are some aspects that they know would be really good, like not getting sick when they get old, then still they don't know whether that world is going to come along in time for them. So they also have a fear of getting their hopes up. And these fears are incredibly powerful in stopping people from having objective, rational discussions about this.
Yeah, if I may, this is a very good point, but I mean, yeah, being led by fear is the worst scenario possible. But I would say two things. First of all, when it comes to leading humanity somewhere or going together somewhere, it's not only rationality. I mean, people are also made of emotion. And you're a scientist, probably you're super good in, let's say, thinking and reflecting and having a very objective and positive vision. But for many people, we need to be sure that they don't only understand, but let's say, affectively also accept, and all their identity has to move, not only the mind, but the heart too. That's the first point. The second one is, for me, the scientific reality is not only the one of biology, or physics, or mathematics, it's also human sciences. And we see that very often technology like biotechnologies go much faster than anthropology. And very often, things are built on a very handcrafted anthropology, disconnected the body from the mind, playing with things without, let's say, taking care of millennials of, I would say, wisdom. And I'm not advocating for the Catholic Church because I think that the Buddhists have also a lot to bring to us, and the same for Muslims and Jews and so on. But what I mean is that we need to pay attention of what it is to be human, not only what it is to be biologically human.
I completely agree. I mean, as an example, for your first point, I would say that there is no objective, rational reason to want to carry on being made out of meat, as opposed to being uploaded into a computer. But there are plenty of emotional reasons for wanting to be made out of meat, and I feel fine with that. I personally, would actually if I had the choice of one or other of those two realities as a way of staying healthy when I get old, I would choose the one that keeps me being made out of meat. And I don't have a rational justification for that, but that doesn't bother me. Most emotions are fine. It's only fear that I have a problem with.
Yeah, the second point, I don't know if you want to introduce a question. My second point is about what you say about death. Because probably because I come from a spirituality which considers that death is not an end, but just a passage going through and to go somewhere else. But I would say that we also we need to pay attention not to be frightened by death. And it seems that a lot of those works are made from this fear, are grounded on this fear. I don't want to die. And so I'm so scared about death that I will do any kind of thing just to survive. And we need to pay attention because at some point we know that in human history, time to time, even during war or whatever, or if there's an accident, some people even endanger their own life to save other people. So it means that for them, their own death is less important than saving people. So just to put that in perspective and just to be sure that fighting death is not the ultimate goal for us.
Yes, I've always wondered about that one. If death is not such a bad thing, so that you don't mind risking your own life, then why would you risk your life to stop somebody else from dying? It sounds like you're scared on their behalf of death. But about this, though, I think you're absolutely right that being scared of death is a problem. I personally don't really think about my work in that context. I think of it overwhelmingly in terms of simply avoiding the suffering that goes with being sick before you die. Because I take the view, from a religious perspective, first of all, God is omnipotent. He can perfectly well strike us down with a thunderbolt, however healthy we are, right? And secondly, this is only one cause of death. There are still trucks to be hit by and asteroids to hit the Earth and so on. So, I don't feel that I'm working against death. I feel that I'm working against the number one source of suffering in the world today.
But so I'd like to interject for a second. We're talking a lot about the fear of death. What about the fear of machines and the fear of artificial intelligence? Both of you are working very deeply with those technologies. What do you say to people that are opposed to these technologies taking over or to these technologies being our gods, going back to the title of this session?
Right, so I actually have not worked in artificial intelligence research for about 20 years. Okay. When I switched to being a biologist, I really switched. But I still keep up with that kind of technology. I think it's going to play an enormous role in ensuring the prosperity and quality of life of humanity going forward. In particular, I think that we always need, when we evaluate the merits of some new technology that's coming along, we need to evaluate it in the context of other technologies that are also coming along. For example, people worry about if everyone's staying healthy when they get old, how are we going to pay the pensions, things like that. That's kind of almost a dumb question if you think in the context of a world in which hardly anybody has a job in the sense that they have today anyway.
Yeah, I think at the crossroads of those two technologies, AI on one side and, let's say, human enhancement technology on the other side, the point, and I agree fully with you, is to try to improve the standard of living or the quality of life of the people and just to try to reduce suffering, because suffering is bad by definition. And so I agree fully with that. But just to come on your point about death, as you say, there are many ways to die, unfortunately, and natural death like getting sick or old and die is just one way, but you can be crushed by a bus. the point is, if you reduce a lot this one and extend life, I don't know if you've seen the movie Time Out. Which is pretty, it's just a fiction film, but this is pretty interesting because it shows what could happen if you have plenty of time. And if you have plenty of time, first, you're not in the rush to do anything, but the danger is perhaps you will do nothing. And the second point is, and I agree, this is purely psychological, this is absolutely not biological, but it has to be taken in consideration. The second point is, if you have 500 years on your account, you will pay attention not to spoil that, and just to be sure that not to lose it, you will probably live in a way which will be, let's say, much more prudent. Just not to be crashed by a bus, because if I know that I just have 20 additional years to live, and then that's all, okay, I lose 20 years. If I lose 500 years, that's another story. And in such a case, perhaps we will have very different lives. And to my mind, the point is not only to add time to life, but to add life to time. The point is not only the duration of life, it's also the intensity of life. And I think that very often people who are so focused on living a long life are not so focused on living an intense life.
Yeah, these are very commonly voiced concerns about a world in which everybody expects to live a long time. But I think they are both wrong. I think they're both incorrect. First of all, with regard to urgency, with regard to doing things, the thing I always say, and this is a little strange saying this to a Catholic priest, but I always say, think back to the first time you had sex. And ask yourself, what were you thinking immediately beforehand? In particular, were you thinking, oh my God, I have to get this person into bed right now because I've only got another 60 years to live? You know, probably not. So, I mean, urgency does not actually come from expectation of how long one has to live. It comes from other things like self-esteem and peer pressure and so on. It's much more short-term, overwhelmingly. The second thing about risk aversion, which you said, again, yes, I mean, a long time ago, I thought this might be a reasonable concern, but quickly I realized that no, actually, when something is risky, we have two options. One option is to not do it, but the other option is to make it less risky. So, as we are now getting, for example, self-driving cars, they are going to make driving a lot less risky. And you know, we are going to be doing this kind of thing all over the place. So I don't really believe that we are going to become terminally risk-averse.
If I may, just to come back on your 2 points, the first example is pretty funny, but I will it's just an example. I would like to oppose another one. When you go to visit a city like Prague, you've never been, you only have 3-4 days. In 3-4 days, you see most of what has to be seen in the city. I live in Paris. There are monuments I've never visited. Just because I know that I have plenty of time, I can do any time, and so I never do it. And I think, so I'm not so sure that this, let's say, the psychological vision of time and the time we have to do something is so unilateral, as you say. I think it's much more complex, and I'm sure that this point of urgency has to be rethought more carefully. That's the first one. And then you were talking about risk, and this is a very good point. Our problem is we're in a society which does not admit risk anymore. I mean, in many societies, people consider that, yeah, death can happen, accident can happen, things can happen, life can happen, actually. And we're in a society where if there's an accident, someone has to be guilty. All the time, we consider, there's a kind of reductionism. We consider that everything can be computerized. If everything can be computerized, everything can be predicted, and so everything can be prevented. And so at the end of the day, we're supposed to avoid any risk. This is, for me, a pure dream. And this is I think that this is a pretty dangerous trend. Because I think that we lose contact with what's reality. Because you can put all the technology in the loop, you can, yeah, it can be safer and so on, and I'm sure that driverless cars are probably safer, at least on the campus where there are only these kind of cars, because when they have to deal with human beings, it's another story. But even like that, you reduce run risk, but there are plenty of other ones. So I don't want to give the feeling to the people that they can live in a riskless society.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you actually make a good point by saying that we have already become more risk-averse than before. But that also kind of makes my point, because we have not become, you know, a more... we don't mind about that. You know, it's not as if we are actually impoverished now relative to a century ago. You know, it's just as... Our quality of life is just as good, even if we are more risk-averse.
Yeah, yeah, but the point is just to be sure that we don't lose the contact with what's the real reality, to be honest.
So what is the real reality at this point, right? We've got Aubrey, your focus on regenerative medicine to cure diseases, something that all of humanity is very invested in. And then you're working at the intersection of wisdom and science. I think right now there are so many people, everyday people that do not work in technology or science, or even in the private sector, that are concerned about technologies taking their jobs, that are concerned about technologies taking away their humanity. Are there things that people can put into practice in their everyday lives, or just a mindset shift that people can adopt to be ready for what's happening when it comes to these technologies coming into our lives more?
To my mind, it's more in the relationship we have with technology. And what I tried to say during the keynote is too often we let technology or progress take the lead. And if we do that, we lose our agency. And for me, the key question is human agency. If we need to be sure that we keep our freedom of choice. And I'm sure that those technologies can do a lot for us, but it has to be done in a way which interacts. And as you said, for example, in companies, many people are just scared to lose their job, just to be replaced by the machine. But I think that replacing a human by a machine is the less disruptive way to use AI. Because that's basic. Okay, it's like closing a plant here in Europe, a factory, and opening one in a country like China because it's less expensive. But actually, it's not so smart. What's smarter is to try to help human beings and machines to work together, to train people to not to be afraid, but also to be like team partners with the machines. And we see that, for example, after the defeat of the best chess players against AI, they started to work together, and they discovered that the best teams are not human ones or even the AI. It's a team with human players and AI chess players. And that's the same for the game of Go with AlphaGo. And so we see that if we can be like a friend with the machines, we can interact in a different way with the machine, but we need to be prepared for that, then we can be even more human. My point is not to, let's say, leave humanity, it's just to be sure that we go in a way which makes us better humans. And that can help.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that we have to recognize that we have the choice how to interact with technology. For example, I actually do not have a cell phone. I don't like cell phones. And I'm, you know, if people think that's weird, then that's their problem, not mine. But I have a perfectly good computer, you know. So I choose which technologies to interact with. And I think as technology advances and society becomes more prosperous, then just so long as we can ensure that there are good new ways to distribute wealth among society, we are going to end up, all of us, having more leisure time, which means more time to disconnect, more time to spend just enriching each other's lives and, you know, making the most of what life has to offer. The reason I used to work in artificial intelligence was precisely that. I felt that it was a big problem that people have to spend so much of their time doing things that they would not be doing unless they were being paid for them. And you know, I wanted to fix that. I think aging is an even more serious problem. That's why I switched fields. But yeah, we have to, I think you're exactly right.
No, but the point is, work is not only a pain, and it's not only a source of revenue. work is also a place for to socialize. It's also, I guess, for your work, which is pretty super interesting. It's also a source of self-esteem and so on.
I don't call my work work because I enjoy it.
Yeah, the same for me.
I would do it even if I were not being paid.
Yeah, and I'm not paid, but I do it. so yeah, I agree with you. But so we need to pay attention that the theory is if people have to work less, they will have more time for leisure in a very antique Greek way. It's like in Athens, if you are free, you don't work. If you don't work, you can do politics, you can do sport. Actually, a very well-educated kind of entertainment or leisure. The problem is, I guess, that if people have more time, some of them will just consume more or be couch potatoes or watch TV and so on. So just the question is, how can we be sure that not only in theory, but practically speaking, if people have more time, we will help them to benefit from this free time.
Totally. And I think what that really comes down to is that we must place much greater priority on education, especially adult education, retraining, giving people the mental tools to make the most of what life has to offer.
Speaking of education and of work, I think we've got enough time. Could each of you share any significant breakthroughs that you've had in your work in the recent months or recent years with the audience around advancing technology for humanity?
Okay, I'll start. I'm the chief scientist of a foundation, a public charity based in California. We do medical research, developing the early stages of new technologies that will eventually be medicines that are helping to keep people healthy late in life. So we do a lot of different things all at the same time, a lot of different projects, and those projects address different aspects of the health problems of old age. And because we're doing so many things, there are always breakthroughs happening every week, every month, but most of them, because it's early stage work, I would have to spend half an hour explaining the background in order that you could see that they were important. So I think I will just summarize by saying that we are seeing breakthroughs now that are unlocking areas of medical progress that were logjammed, that were completely stationary for 10 or 20 years. Things that people just thought were too hard. And we are now finding with new technologies, new gene editing technologies, new stem cell technologies and so on, we are finding ways to make them not too hard anymore.
Just an example at the crossroad of education and technology. Among our board members is Joe Ito, the director of the MIT Media Lab, and he works on something which, for me, is super interesting. In artificial intelligence, there are several ways to put the human being. It can be in the loop, means he has something to do in the process. Can be over the loop and monitor the process. Can be out of the loop and it's completely autonomous. But what he tries to do is to put humanity in the loop. And humanity in the loop, it means, for example, if you build an AI to help lawyers or physicians, it means that all those people will be interacting with the machine. The machine will help them to be better practitioners, better lawyers, and at the same time, they will train the machine to be a better help for them. Doing that, you have a more genuine, more authentic way to use AI, and you have more trained and less scared people in the companies, in the hospitals, and so on.
Okay. I'm getting the wrap-up signal from backstage, but really quickly, final thoughts. How much trust can we or should we put into quote-unquote new gods or technology and science? You both sound actually very optimistic about the trust that we can be putting into these things.
I think this is a classic case where the right way to say things is trust but verify. I don't really think trust is the right word. I think awareness is the right word. Awareness of the opportunities and therefore awareness of how to make the most of technology for oneself and for everybody else.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for me, the danger is not in the technology. The danger is more in the human being developing the technology, and very often we see that the weak point is the human being using or developing the technology. So I think that I'm super optimistic. The only point is we need to pay attention each time we go forward one step, that we go in the right direction, because those technologies are a bit like rocket packed. So we can go very fast somewhere, but if we're facing a wall, we just crash faster in the wall. If we're facing in a good direction, we go in the good direction.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, but you made my job very easy. I feel like I could leave you two in a room and you'd write at least 3 encyclopedias in a couple of hours.
Oh, it was a friendly conversation.
Yes,
Thank you, Professor.
thank you again. Great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.